Hello, friends. Sleep Tight Stories, Sleep Tight Relax, and Sleep Tight Science are now available to play on Story Button, the device that makes it easy to listen to our shows and more without having to use a phone or tablet. This month, you can save $10 at storybutton.com when you use the code SLEEPTIGHT. Story Button, the home of imagination. Hello, friends, and welcome to Sleep Tight Stories. Ester and Araya have found the path to the castle with the help of the Luninae. They are waiting until dark before they leave. Will Esther's father be in the castle? Will they be able to get into the castle to find him? The Magical Book of Dreams, Part 30. Ester and Araya quietly said goodbye to the Luninae, expressing their gratitude for their guidance. They slowly made their exit from the cave, and the dry air of the path greeted them as they started. The exit was surrounded by the thorny bushes they encountered before, slowing their progress and leaving them exposed to whoever might be looking their way. Araya was nervous and tense, prepared for some creature of the gray to jump out and surprise them. Guided by the Luninae's route, they tread softly toward the castle, their steps deliberate amidst the desolate surroundings. The path, once obscured by neglect, revealed itself to them as a narrow, winding trail through a landscape scarred by darkness. To their left, the remains of what once might have been lush fields lay barren, the soil cracked and lifeless, evidence of the land's suffering. Sparse, stone-like grasses quietly shattered beneath their feet, signs of previous life in this abandoned expanse. To their right, the skeletal remains of the edge of the forest bordered the path. The trees were stripped of their foliage, their branches reaching toward the sky like miserable clawing hands. All of it turned to stone. The air here was still. It was quiet. Far too quiet, even for night. In the distance, they could see the castle in its grim light, its towers and spires silhouetted like spiky teeth against the dark, cloudy sky. The closer they got, the more the castle seemed to dominate the landscape, its presence oppressive, as if it were watching them, aware of their every move. Despite all they saw, Ester and Araya pressed on, their determination powered by the mission at hand. The dry riverbed mentioned by the Luninae soon came into view, its bed long since turned dry, leading them on a winding path towards the castle's base. The way forward became more challenging. The ground beneath their feet was littered with stones, and sharp rocks crunched softly with each step. At least the sunken path offered them some protection from the watchful eyes of those guarding the castle. Then the sounds began, the growls, the yips. The Scalix and the Chickalors were out patrolling. The Luninae must have been mistaken. Ester stopped, looked at Araya and mouthed, "What do we do?" The tension they felt was as real as the mist covering the tops of the castle's spires. The feeling of defeat started to make itself known, a stark contrast to the hope that had lifted their spirits when they left the cave. The sides of the riverbed didn't offer them much protection, and there was nowhere to run. Araya, expressionless, whispered, "We continue." The distance wasn't great, and Araya knew what she would do if she had to. Ester must find her father. If she had to chase the creatures herself, then so be it. Ester and Araya continued cautiously, the silence between them heavy with fear. With each step closer, the castle's cruel presence seemed to swell, daring them to proceed. Then, Araya saw it. Right in front of them, but 20 paces away, was a Scalix, sniffing the air. It looked old, with scars down its snout and skin the color of the sky. Ester and Araya stopped. Their hearts beat so hard that the sound in their ears was deafening. They stood there, frozen in place, not daring to move, waiting. The Scalix, sniffing in the air, caught a scent and looked their way. Its legs coiled, and it leapt over the side of the dry riverbank and bounded off into the distance, following whatever had caught its attention. The growls and yips followed it. Ester realized that she had been holding her breath for far too long. Weak from the tension, she took a knee to take a moment to breathe and recoup. She could hear Araya's heavy breaths behind her. "That was close," Araya whispered. Thankfully, the Scalix's eyes were weak, and the scent of something else was strong. Ester slowly rose. "I didn't realize just how bad they smell," Ester whispered, trying to laugh, but only able to force a smile. Smiling, Araya whispered, "The entrance is not far. Let's keep going before they lose interest in whatever they are chasing." Ester and Araya started moving again towards the secret door to the castle's dungeons. They continued to follow the dry riverbed, watching their footing, as one misstep might create noise that could be heard above. The riverbed led them to a spot where fruit bushes used to grow. Now, these bushes were just a bunch of dry, tangled branches. Hidden among these old bushes, just as they were told, was a forgotten entrance. Long ago, it was a way out for those needing to escape the castle unseen. Today, it was going to be how Ester and Araya got inside. The door was old and made of heavy, weathered wood. Its surface was rough, marked by time and the elements, with metal bands across it that were rusted and threatened to creak at the slightest touch. Ester tried to pull on the door, but it creaked in protest. It was heavy, too heavy to move without making a great deal of noise. She was so close to finally seeing her father. She couldn't let a door get in her way. "Let me help," Araya whispered. "Together, we might be able to open it without much effort." Ester and Araya placed their hands on an old iron door handle, took a deep breath, and pulled with all their might. The door made a low, groaning creak that echoed in the quiet of the surrounding thicket. Despite their efforts to be gentle, the door's age and disrepair made it impossible to move silently. They both stood there holding their breath, listening for any sign that the noise had been heard. As the heavy door swung open, Ester and Araya stepped into complete darkness. The air inside was cool and damp. For a moment, they stood still, letting their eyes adjust to the lack of light. "It's so dark," Ester whispered, her voice barely echoing in the narrow space. "Maybe I can use good magic to light our way." Araya, reaching out to find Ester's hand, replied softly, "No, wait. Light can travel a great distance, and it is best if our presence is not yet known. Stay close. We'll need to rely on touch until our eyes adjust." The hallway they found themselves in was long and narrow, the walls cold and slightly slick to the touch. As they tentatively moved forward, their footsteps echoed softly, muffled by the dampness that seemed to fill everything. The smell of mold and earth filled their nostrils, a musty scent that spoke of many cycles without sunlight or fresh air. "Do you hear that?" Ester asked after a few moments, pausing. A faint dripping sound could be heard in the distance, the slow, steady rhythm of water leaking from the ceilings or walls. "Yes, it sounds like this place isn't completely sealed off. There must be water getting in somewhere," Araya answered. As their eyes began to adapt to the darkness, they could make out faint outlines. A door here, a turn in the corridor there. The visibility was minimal, but it was enough to keep them from walking into the walls. Every so often, they would pass what felt like openings or doorways, leading to rooms unknown and unseen. "I never imagined it would be like this," Ester said. "Neither did I," Araya agreed. "But we are here for a reason. Keep moving and stay alert." Together, they continued down the hallway. The sound of their careful footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor. The dampness of the corridor seemed to swallow the sound, making their footsteps sound distant, as if someone else was walking far ahead of them. Almost causing Ester to trip and fall, they came to a long, winding staircase carved from stone, ascending into the shadows. The steps, worn in the middle, went upward into the dark of the castle. As they began their ascent, the air around them felt cooler, giving way to a chill that seemed to seep into their bones. The staircase was narrow, forcing them to move in single file, with Ester still leading. The stone underfoot was uneven, with some steps higher than others. As they climbed, the walls seemed to close in around them, the space growing more narrow with each turn of the staircase. Here and there, niches were carved into the stone, some empty, others holding the remains of statues long since crumbled to dust. The air was stale, filled with the scent of old stone, the musty odor of decay, and the faint smell of scalyx. The higher they climbed, the more the staircase spiraled endlessly upward, drawing them towards the unknown. Finally, they stumbled upon a door that seemed different from the rest they had seen. It was slightly ajar, allowing a sliver of light to spill into the hallway. Muffled noises, unmistakably human, spilled from within, suggesting they were no longer alone in the depths of the castle. "This must be it," Araya whispered, her voice hopeful. "It's brighter in there, and there are sounds. Your father might be beyond this door." Ester's heart raced at the thought. The possibility of being so close to her father after all this time filled her with a surge of emotions. Hope, fear, and an overwhelming sense of urgency. In her excitement and anticipation, something extraordinary happened. A soft glow began to pour from her skin, showing the good magic flowing through her. It was subtle at first, but it grew brighter, illuminating the space around them with a warm, comforting light. Araya noticed the change and whispered to Esther, her eyes wide. "Esther, look at you. You're glowing." Esther glanced down at her hands, watching in amazement as the light danced across her skin. Her connection to good magic was revealing itself in such a visible way. "We need to get in there," Esther said, her voice steadier than she felt. The light surrounding her seemed to give her courage. "But we have to be careful," Araya whispered. Together, they pushed the door open just enough to slip inside, the glow from Esther providing them with the light they needed to see. They stepped into a vast, echoing chamber that stretched out before them, its far reaches covered in shadows despite the glow coming from Esther. The room was lined with cells, their barred fronts giving glimpses of the prisoners contained within. The air was heavy with sadness, but as they entered, a murmur rippled through the chamber, a wave of voices whispering, "The princess has come." Ester and Araya moved cautiously forward, their eyes scanning the dimly lit room. This time, Araya took the lead, ready to protect Esther. The prisoners, shadows within shadows, pressed against the bars of their cells to get a closer look at the source of the warm light. Hope, long since faded, flickered in their eyes as they saw Esther. At the far end of the great room, in a cell more isolated than the rest, sat a lone figure. The man was hunched over, his features difficult to make out in the weak light. But even from a distance, there was something familiar about his posture, the set of his shoulders. His hair was long and dirty, and his clothes were tattered. Yet, even in this state, there was an undeniable presence about him, a strength that not even the harshness of imprisonment could diminish. Esther took a step forward, then another. The murmurs of the prisoners grew louder as she moved closer to the cell that held the man. "Father?" Esther whispered, full of emotion. The man lifted his head slowly. His face looked tired and worn, but his eyes, which looked just like Esther's, lit up when he saw her. At that moment, everything around them seemed to freeze. Esther could feel both the happiness of finally finding him and the sadness for all the lost time. And yes, right there in front of her was her father. She had finally found him. And that is the end of this part. Good night. Sleep tight.